So let's take it a little bit further now. In a capitalist system where competition and continuous profitability are the most important dimensions to success economically, what is the benefit to people being encouraged to think positively? In other words, let's ask ourselves, who benefits from the production of happy subjects, which is to say happy people, which is the project of positive psychology? Well, for one thing, we could argue that large corporations benefit because happier people are more productive. They probably blame, excuse me, they blame their employers or their colleagues less often for unhappiness that they might experience because they have been taught that it's up to them to generate happiness. When people feel responsible for their own happiness, they are less demanding of their surroundings for happiness. So they might be more willing to endure more difficult work situations, more demanding jobs, less pay, for example, because they believe that it's up to them to make the best of it, right? So you can see how, in certain cases, an ideology like positive psychology could benefit a system where workers can sometimes be exploited, right? Under capitalism, exploitation of labor is necessary for companies to be profitable. In order for companies to make a lot of money, they have to extract labor value out of their employees. And we can see how employees that feel that it's their responsibility to stay happy no matter what happens, and that keeping your chin up and thinking positive is their responsibility, could actually benefit a boss, for example, that wants to really push their employees to the limit and get as much work out of them as they possibly can. So, where does positive psychology leave people who are unhappy, who either society labels as unhappy or who call themselves unhappy? There are always going to be unhappy people in society, people who are frustrated and dissatisfied with their current circumstances, for example, people who want to fight for justice because they see unfairness around them and they're dissatisfied with it and they want to change it. People who themselves feel left out of the conversation for whether it's reasons about of their identity, their race, their gender identity, their sexual orientation, their if they're disabled. There are all kinds of types of populations that feel disenfranchised, and it makes them unhappy and they want to change it. So the positive psychology movement would claim that these people are failing to produce happiness, that they aren't working hard enough to look on the bright side, right? So the positive psychology movement isn't interested in the conditions that produce unhappiness. They're interested in encouraging people to produce happiness themselves. It's not about what's around you, it's about you yourself. So positive psychology can be seen to discourage people from critiquing or wanting to change or wanting to, criticize the societies that they belong to or the norms that govern the societies that they belong to. So what about people who want to be alone, who like to withdraw to themselves and think, their own thoughts and maybe feel grumpy sometimes, or maybe are just the kinds of people that prefer thinking and kind of stewing than being social and happy and upbeat? For some people, being alone is enjoyable. Being an interior person, an introvert, for its own sake, is one of the foundations of some of the great art of our civilization, right? Of any civilization. Often great artists, great thinkers, great philosophers, people who have produced wonderful, art of all kinds are people who are not happy in the traditional sense. They're people who have spent a lot of time thinking, a lot of time with their own thoughts. And through that process, they've produced works of art that have changed the world, right? So positive psychology suggests that being alone a lot, thinking your own thoughts, kind of really getting into your feelings might inhibit happiness. And being an interior person, thinking your own thoughts kind of to the point where maybe other people think you're a weirdo, these types of behaviors are not relevant to this kind of neoliberal entrepreneurship, this sense of improving yourself continuously, right? That we talked about last week, working on yourself, making yourself continuously more attractive to others, right? So our culture tends to discourage this sort of interiority because we think that, it's not helpful to people. Um, and there are some real consequences to a culture that doesn't encourage thoughtfulness and doesn't encourage kind of exploring your own feelings, having an interior life. And our culture is more and more oriented towards positivity, which can be a good thing. It can be, good for people in terms of encouraging each other, being grateful, but it can also have some negative consequences. Discouraging people from having an interior life can have some major long-term consequences to a society. So on that note, I'm going to sign off and we'll talk about this more in the Zoom meeting.